Lately I've been fielding questions that goes something like this. Hey coach, why am I doing all this low intensity training? I'm trying to get faster. Surely I have to train harder to get faster, not easier. Now if this is something that you can relate to, keep listening. Unfortunately, the way the question gets asked can set you up to fail as an athlete. Let me explain. Firstly, consider just one fact. When you're trying to work out how to get fitter faster, it's useful to look at how the world's best train. And the fact is that the world's best endurance athletes, our world tour cyclists, our top triathletes all do way more low intensity hours in training than amateurs, yet they go so much faster in racing. So there's clearly something in this low intensity training. To get your head around this concept, that going slower in training can actually help you get faster in racing, which I know sounds counterintuitive, let's just reframe the question. Hey coach, the pros do huge volumes of low intensity training and clearly they're faster than I am. Why do they do this? And how could it possibly apply to my training? Yes, I heard the skepticism too, but that's okay. Always better to ask questions if you don't know why you're doing something. Now just by reframing the question, notice how your brain isn't trapped into thinking there's only one possible answer. So let's explore the science and practice of low intensity training and why it's absolutely critical for your improvement as an endurance athlete. But they do so many more hours than me. Does that still apply even if I'm only doing 8 to 12 hours a week? Yeah, it kind of does. Way back in 2004, the first paper was published that looked at just how much low, moderate and high intensity exercise was optimal for promoting performance in endurance sports. This and subsequent research found that successful athletes do far less high intensity training than you'd think. In fact, the best athletes spend around 75 to 85% of their training sessions at low intensities, with less than 20% at high intensity. The authors coined the term polarised training, where endurance athletes tend to train at polar opposites of the spectrum, either really low intensity or really high intensity, but not much moderate intensity in between. Subsequent studies have noted that a pyramidal approach, which has a slightly different intensity distribution, also produces superior results to going hard all the time. Again, the predominant amount of training is done at low intensity, more at medium and even less at high intensity. Now consider pro cyclists who are training 20 to 30 hours per week. They tend to do even more low intensity at about 90% of their total training time. Why? Well, imagine training 30 hours per week and doing 20% of your training at high intensity. That would mean if you're training 6 days a week, that'd be 6 hours per week at high intensity, or in other words, you'd have to do at least an hour a day at or above threshold, because that's what high intensity training is. No one can sustain this for long without breaking down. So although we do need high intensity work to get faster, we can't just do hard stuff all the time. Enter our low intensity training. This is what allows us to get our total weekly training load high enough to improve without destroying ourselves in the process. Now the balance between low and high intensity training is what the polarised and pyramidal models are all about. How can you balance the hard and easy days to optimise your performance gains? It applies across all levels of athletes, irrespective of how many hours a week you put in. The idea that about 2 out of every 10 sessions focuses on high intensity work is about right for most people. If you're still not convinced, consider what happens to those athletes who train as hard as they can every day. The term time crunch cyclist comes to mind here. If I have very little time to train, let's just smash myself every day. Now when you do this, you typically improve in the first month, but by the end of the second month, all progress has plateaued and you're starting a downward slide as you descend into an overtrained state, with injury, illness and burnout not too far away. This approach is simply not sustainable over a longer term period. But if I didn't get sick, my plan would have worked. Yeah, but you did get sick because you ran your immune system down to empty because of overtraining. Those that can sustain the go hard or go home mentality do so because they end up training at moderate intensity all the time. They never do low intensity work and are simply too tired to ever really hit high enough power intensities on their hard days to stimulate improvement. Every day is simply mediocre and their race performances reflect this and are fairly mediocre too. Now in my next video, we'll look at exactly what low intensity training offers that high intensity does not, and why this is critical if you want to improve as an endurance athlete.